Something I used to want really bad back in the day was, cubic texture interpolation. And some games like Rage had it, but it really had it just to try to help sharpen up the textures, which is just a result of, whatever alpha beta parameters you picked for the cubic spline interpolator. But it wasn't exactly meant for like higher order filtering, so to speak. And so what would happen is, if you enabled the bicubic texture interpolation in Rage, things would have a little bit of increased edge accutance, a little bit better contrast. But that's only because, depending on what alpha beta parameters you pick for the cubic spline, you essentially introduce overshoot and undershoot, they call it. It's basically an Instagram filter. It's called an unsharp mask in image processing dork speak. But the Instagram filter look, that's what that is an unsharp mask. That, and they added detail textures. But when I talk about cubic interpolation, like what I wanted was really proper cubic texture interpolation. And the main issue with it, though, is if you use a standard separable kernel, it's still going to look kind of aliased in a way, or pixelated, if you want to call it that, because both axes are done separately. Whereas the full effect of it kind of doesn't really become apparent unless it's a symmetric kernel, they call it. But, symmetric kernels will be, they're, nonlinear complexity, whatever the big O notation is. But 4x4 separable will be, you know, 8 taps, but then a 4x4 symmetric will be 16, right? So, but they diverge the larger the filter gets. And yeah, I'm kind of off the rails on the nerd shit, but cubic polynomials would have been pretty cool to see used for the Bezier patches. And I'm not sure if they're that much more expensive to render than just standard polygons. Like if they had made the brushwork, the handrails and all that out of standard brushwork, if it would have really mattered. Although one thing I can say is, because displacements really are not nearly as useful with a source engine, and they're not the same as NURBS, so to speak, but they, in a way, they could fill a similar role. I've used them like that before for rails and shit like that. But the NURBS in Quake and Doom, Quake 3 and Doom 3 are way easier to work with. And so it's kind of no wonder they get used all over the place. But still, the Adobe Animate guy, fuck, I wonder if he's ever played those games before. But that's what quadratic looks like. It's nerd shit, but it's a second order filter. Cubic is third order. So linear is first order. Quadratic is second. Cubic is third. So if you convolve 2 linears, you get a quadratic. If you convolve 3 of them, you get a cubic. And if you convolve, 2 square impulses, that's called zero order. If you convolve 2 of those, you get first order, which is the linear, right? So 4, box functions would make a cubic as well. But it's called third order, just because, it on its own is considered zero order. That's why you might see some digital to analog converters have what's called a zero order hold. That's what that is. Zero order, because it's basically convolving the samples with a box function. And yeah, whatever, nerd shit, but it's one of the things I'd love to see what it would look like. I wonder if anybody's ever going to do that with Doom, or some other Doom 3 source code port. Somebody change the programming for that shit so that they're proper cubic patches or whatever. I wonder if you could just put that code into the game and everything would just work correctly or something. I don't know. Kind of curious what that would change. But Doom 3, I might try some other source ports, because this one is pretty much just a proper vanilla port. Some things feel slightly different. It could just be placebo, just because I know that it's a different installer, this or that. But I would like to, you know, mess with that one where they have shadow maps in it and there's soft shadows. And like, there's a million ways to do soft shadows for shadow volumes, but there's also a million ways to do it with shadow maps, way more actually. All different kind variant shadow maps, exponential shadow maps, cascaded shadow maps, logarithmic screen space map, logarithmic split shadow maps, or whatever the fuck they're called, right? All these different filtering types, camera space shadow mapping. I've been on that Slav shit lately. That video, you could probably go look it up. The dude in the video, he links his website, which is, it's still up actually, and the dude is in uh, Croatia. The only reason I was able to figure that out because he sounded kind of Slavic, but then when I finally paid attention to the video, I noticed the .hr, which HR for Hrvatska, which is what they call Croatia. But that video is like 20 plus years old. It's a pretty cool shadow mapping program. But I've been looking at computer graphics research for so long. It's kind of crazy to see how much technology, like, not only takes 10, 15, 20 years to end up in video games, but like how much technology never does. It's kind of amazing just what, programmers can even come up with. So, as I'll kind of get into in a second, right? Like, all the shit that Boiling Point did was pretty incredible. But I don't know what they put in the water over in fucking Slav land or fucking what, I don't know. It's probably fucking radiation or whatever, or vodka. But it's like all the fucking cool graphics technology comes from places like that. And Boiling Point, like, it really is pretty phenomenal what's possible at the time that the shit came out, right? So, like, for example, Doom 3, like, even when it first got debuted and, like, they had to show, it was like Macworld or whatever, they had to, like, go show them in the back, no, this is real, it's running real time. The stuff that Doom 3 was doing, even at that point, had already technically been possible for several years at least, like, with actual, like, real time rendering. But, there's so many different things, like, one of these engines I've seen recently, they had, uh, there's something for it. It's like parallax offset mapping or something like that. I don't think, is that the right one? It's something like that, or no, silhouette parallax occlusion mapping. Yeah, SILPOM. That was something that's fucking been around for like 20 years. There's some, rendering engine, fucking channel that they were talking about. So there's this new game that I don't remember what it was, but a lot of this stuff. It's funny enough. I remember reading a paper about Black Ops 2 years and years ago. It was like an i3D paper or whatever, talking about how they were putting physical based rendering into fucking blops. And I'm pretty sure, like, even they were already using like hemispherical or harmonics or something. But as I said, that shit was already being used on the original Xbox technically. But I mean, that's the only other fucking game I could think of. And I believe the first engine or game with like a proper physical based rendering engine would have been, I think it was Order 1886. Because I remember reading, it was like SIGGRAPH or i3D papers of theirs uh, years ago. But um, every time I see these modern games, they advertise their new fancy technology. It's almost always shit like this. Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that 15 years ago. But in some weird ways, graphics just, like, it's not like they have just stagnated, right? And I mean, if you ask me, they don't need to be any better than they are. And I mean, that's before they put the stupid, deferred rendering, smear the fake anti-aliasing smear filters and all that other shit. We're talking like without that, the shit already looks so fucking good. And I think the only real issues that they have is a lack of order independent translucency or shit like that. And so sort of like with the cubic polynomial shit, I wonder if somebody will try adding that to Doom 3's source ports or whatever, get the order independent translucency and like bullshit like that. If you go, if you watch, I think it was the 2005 keynote by Carmack. He was talking about the engine they had in development at the time, which they ended up abandoning and later became what is now known as Tech 5. And I think the reason they renamed and did this tech numbering shit was because normally it was game name engine. But they couldn't call it Rage Engine because Rockstar had already called an engine that, right? It's just like with Rage, it stands for Rockstar Advanced Game Engine or whatever fucking bullshit. But I think that's what kind of created that issue with id Software's, engine naming or whatever. But I believe it's the '05 keynote. They were talking about different shit like that I'm talking about right now, which is part of one of the reasons I've always been fascinated with it. And it's like we have the source code for Quake 3, we got the source code for Doom 3. It's like, could somebody please implement some of this different shit he was talking about? Because that one experimental renderer with Shadow Maps, branch that I found, yeah, that it even acknowledges, yeah, this is with Carmack's experimental code. And they were kind of taken aback by the fact that Carmack claimed that there wasn't a visible difference. But what they probably don't realize is he was probably playing the shit at 640 by 480 or something. But yeah, there's some of those trappings are already there. And I wish somebody would just maybe I'll end up fucking doing that, learn how to program. That'll become my sort of hobby type of shit. It's like Terry Davis. I've tried fucking with Loosethos before, or Temple OS. It was called Loosethos when I first found them. But I'm not smart enough for that. The dude was a fucking genius, right? That dude's like the Ukrainian video game developer of the United States or some shit. Even down to the all right, I'm not going to get too jocular with it right this second, but that guy was just astronomically fucking. It's like, how the fuck did he do that? But I've fucked a little bit with like Commodore 64 emulators, or like I've tried loading Loosethos in an emulator and playing around with shit. It is nice you can get environments nowadays where you can there's sort of like not a risk for failure, right? I mean, even Terry Davis recommended running his shit in an emulator, and like most of his shit he did from Ubuntu. And rest in peace to him. But it made me think about that recently, fucking with the hex editing bullshit with Painkiller. So I want to try to find a hex editor that will show the assembly. Problem is, you have to have the symbol tables or whatever the fuck they call it, because every CPU instruction set is different, and I don't know, this is a bunch of bullshit, but I might fuck with that, some kind of emulator, and just try to play with writing assembly. Maybe someday I'll, fucking, I'll be the one to finally add the bullshit to, Doom 3 or whatever, in another 20 years when everybody for sure doesn't give a fuck. I don't know. But I think that's part of the data preservation is the hackability, right? Like in the, the GNU sense of hacking. That's why they want to stop you from using the software how you want. Because if you can, you know, modify it, you actually have it, physically retain it, and you can, not only can you modify it how you want, but they can't fuck with it at all, then that stops them from getting able to sell you the same fucking game again, 5 times in 20 years. Right. But yeah, whatever. Doom 3's been pretty fucking cool.